You know, sometimes all it takes is one single battle to change everything. I mean, everything. To stop a warlord who seemed unstoppable, to break apart an entire empire, and to create the legendary Three Kingdoms of China. We're going to dive into the story of a fight against absolutely impossible odds, a battle that literally redrew the map of a nation. Okay, so if you were to travel along China's huge Yangtze River, you might just stumble upon these characters carved right into the stone. They say Chibi, red cliffs. And they've been here for over 1,000 years. Just think about that. They're like this permanent scar, a marker for a fleeting, brutal battle that happened right on this spot. A battle that would go on to shape China for centuries. So to really get what happened here, we gotta start with the main antagonist. The guy who thought he was completely invincible, leading this massive, terrifying army. All right, picture this. It's the year 280 AD. The Han Dynasty, which had been in charge for like 400 years, is totally collapsing. It's chaos. And in that power vacuum, one man rises to the top. The brilliant and totally ruthless warlord Cao Cao. He's already managed to unify all of northern China, and now he's looking south. He wants the whole thing. So, the matchup is pretty stark. On one side, you've got the one-man show, Cao Cao, and his massive army. And on the other, a shaky, last-minute alliance of southern warlords, guys like Quan and Liu Bei, who were literally the only thing standing in his way. And to make sure everyone knew how serious he was, Cao Cao sends a letter to his rivals, and in it, he boasts that he's commanding an army of, wait for it, 800,000 men. 800,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. This wasn't just an army. It was a psychological weapon, a number so huge it was meant to just completely crush their will to fight before a single sword was drawn.
Now, was he exaggerating? Oh, for sure. Modern historians think his actual number of fighting troops was probably closer to 230,000. But here's the thing. Even with that lower number, the Allies could only pull together about 50,000 soldiers. So yeah, the odds were still insane. This was a true David versus Goliath situation.
So, what do you do when you're facing a force like that? Well, you definitely don't meet them head on. No way. Instead, pure desperation pushes these bitter rivals to team up in this very fragile alliance. And just take a look at the map here to see how bad it was. You can see Cao Cao's army just pouring down from the north. They're basically pinning the southern warlords against the giant Yangtze River. Their backs are to the wall. Literally. There's almost nowhere left to go. So, with total destruction staring them in the face, a huge debate breaks out in the court of one of the southern warlords, Quan. You had one camp, led by his chief clerk, who looked at the pure math and said, "Guys, we have to surrender. It's the only logical move." But then you had others, like the commander Zhou Yu and this genius strategist Zhuge Liang, who saw a tiny sliver of hope. Their argument? Don't fight their strengths, fight their weaknesses. And the whole debate comes to a head in this one super dramatic moment. Sun Quan just draws his sword and wham, he slices the corner clean off his desk. Then he looks at everyone and says, anyone who dares to mention surrender again will end up just like this desk. And just like that, the argument was over. They were going to fight. Okay, so a head-on fight was suicide. They knew that. What they needed was a plan. Something smart, something tricky, something that hit Cao Cao right where he was weakest. And it turns out Cao Cao's giant army had a lot of weaknesses. For one, his soldiers were mostly from the north. They knew nothing about fighting on water and were getting terribly seasick on the river. Two, the southern climate was making them sick with all sorts of tropical diseases. Three, a lot of his troops were brand new conscripts from lands he'd just conquered, so their morale was, let's just say, not great. Basically, he was leading a massive, exhausted, sick, and inexperienced naval force. That's the weak spot. So, the whole Allied strategy revolved around these things right here. They're called Mengchong. Basically, they're fast, agile assault ships. But here's the genius part. They weren't going to be used to attack anyone. Nope. They were the centerpiece of an incredible trick. Okay, here's how the plan went down, step by step. First, one of the Allied commanders, Huang Gai, sends a fake letter to Cao Cao saying, "Hey, I want to switch sides, I'm defecting with my ships." Step 2, those defecting ships are packed to the brim with dry reeds, kindling, and oil. Basically, they're giant floating bombs. Step 3, they start sailing towards Cao Cao's fleet, which, and this is key, he had chained all together to try and stop his men from getting seasick. Big mistake. Step 4, just as they get close, the sailors light the fuses, set the ships on fire, and bail out on smaller boats. And then, the final piece of the puzzle. A strong southeastern wind picks up at the perfect moment, pushing these raging fire ships right into Cao Cao's trapped, chained-up fleet.
You can just imagine the chaos. The fire just exploded through the sleet. It was unstoppable. In just a few hours, Cao Cao's huge navy was gone, completely destroyed by fire, an absolute inferno on the water. This wasn't just a victory. This was a total disaster for Cao Cao, and the fallout from this one battle would go on to reshape China for the next 100 years. I mean, the defeat was total. Cao Cao's surviving soldiers were forced into this nightmare retreat through muddy, disease-ridden swamps. What the fire didn't get, famine and sickness did. It was an absolute catastrophe for his army. And the impact was immediate and massive. This victory secured the entire south for the Allies. It single-handedly stopped Cao Cao from conquering all of China. And instead of a unified empire, it locked in the division that would lead directly to the legendary Three Kingdoms period. The states of Wei, Shu, and Wu. So we know what happened, and we know the result was world-changing. But believe it or not, even after almost 2,000 years, there are still parts of this story that are total mystery. You know what's wild? For more than 1,300 years, nobody has been able to agree on exactly where the battle happened. The river has changed its course so much over the centuries that it's nearly impossible to know for sure. Was it at the spot with the carvings, or was it somewhere else entirely, a place that a famous poet wrote about hundreds of years later? It's a mystery we might just never solve. But even if we don't know the exact spot, its legacy is everywhere. I mean, it's been the subject of epic poems, it's a staple of Peking opera, and it's a massive turning point in the legendary novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And today, you've got blockbuster movies about it and tons of video games that let you replay the battle yourself. And you can see it right here in this shot from a Peking opera. The characters from the Battle of Red Cliffs have become these larger-than-life figures in Chinese culture. They're not just historical people anymore. They're symbols of cunning, of bravery, of arrogance. And their story just keeps being told over and over again. Which really brings us back to the core question, doesn't it? How can one single moment, a fake surrender, a lucky gust of wind, do more than just win a battle? How can it go on to define an entire era? The Battle of Red Cliffs is maybe the best example in history that sometimes it's not the strongest who wins, it's the smartest.